Thanks for joining us as we continue our conversation with Stephen Meyer.
So to begin this segment, I want to ask you about your road to Cambridge and getting your PhD, and what made you go to Cambridge? What were some of the things that led up to that? And tell us kind of what you studied there and why.
Well, to start with, I was a hopelessly romantic Anglophile. Even backing up the story a little bit, my Christian conversion really started as I began to read the Bible in high school, especially the last year or two of high school. I didn't think I was a Christian. I was hearing radio programs from parts of the country where everyone had Southern accents and were talking about how to give your life to Christ. I probably tried it 100 times and was waiting for something really big to happen. And so, but when I went to a 10-year high school reunion, I had people coming up to me who had become Christians since we had all left school. And they said, "Oh, I know you were a Christian, so you'd be really excited to know." I thought, I didn't realize I was talking about Christianity all the time, but I did not think that I myself was a Christian. And so people perceived that I must be, but and it was really through those college years wrestling through philosophical issues and being offered a very powerful philosophical apologetic for belief in God, a theistic apologetic, that I really became convinced first of theism and also of Christianity, but there was a big push-pull internally in me in being either not sure or not ready, thinking I don't think I can live up to that, and my lifestyle is going one direction and my beliefs are going another, and so it wasn't until really the first year out of college that I started to feel settled in my conviction as a Christian. And it was a year or two later that I went to Dallas. I was working as a geophysicist in the oil industry, and I attended a conference in Dallas called Christianity Challenges the University, an international conference of atheists and theists. And it was pulled together by a very interesting young scholar named Roy Abraham Varghese, and funded by a Dallas businessman named Bill Garrison. And they did indeed bring an international lineup of world-class scientists and philosophers to discuss, including some Nobel laureates, to discuss the big questions: the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin and nature of human consciousness, of the mind-body question. And in listening to the individual sessions and seminars, I was blown away to perceive, to learn, to get the sense that the theists had the intellectual initiative in these conversations. I had gone to a small liberal arts, Presbyterian, Christianish college, and I had a lot of the same intellectual insecurities that most kids that come out of Christian colleges have. That, well, I know what my professors thought, but I'm sure in the big bad world, those perspectives aren't going to hold up to critical scrutiny. And it was very much the opposite on display at this conference. In the first panel on the origin of the universe, the great cosmologist, astrophysicist, who was a graduate assistant to Edwin Hubble, this man being Alan Sandage, spoke and described how the discoveries from modern cosmology had led him to do deep soul searching about his long-held agnostic materialistic worldview, and how he had, as a result, eventually come to belief in Christianity. He had a full-blown conversion from agnosticism to Christianity, and in the process of that, he talked about the evidence for the beginning of the universe that he had helped to establish as Edwin Hubble's successor in one of those big telescopes. And also the fine-tuning evidence had led him to come to the conviction there must be a designing mind, creator behind everything. And in the session on the origin of life, there was a similar announcement of a change of view, of an intellectual conversion by a leading biophysicist who was a researcher on the question, who researched the question of the origin of the first life. He had written the best-selling advanced text on the chemical origin of life called Biochemical Predestination, and announced at the conference that he no longer accepted his own theory and believed that the discovery of the information-bearing properties of DNA, the digital code that had been discovered in DNA, which had to be explained in order to explain the origin of life, pointed not to an undirected chemical process, but to some sort of, as he put it, intelligent cause. He actually said that it was time for the philosophers to reopen the natural theological question, that is to say, what can we know about God by studying nature? So these and other people speaking at the conference about those big questions really intrigued me. I got to know one of the scientists in the immediate aftermath of that, who happened to be working at a Dallas research organization and think tank named Charles Thaxton. And over the ensuing year, he kind of mentored me. He had written a book called The Mystery of Life's Origin, all about this question of the origin of life. And it really suited me because I had done work in my undergraduate degree was in physics, and I did a second major in geology, and I also did a minor in philosophy.
Wow.
And I was working in the oil industry doing digital signal processing of seismic data, which was an early form of information technology. So the origin of life was just one of those problems that it had physics and thermodynamics and chemistry and geology, and also, most importantly, this big question, where did the information come from in the DNA that's necessary to make life? And I thought, man, if this is a question about information, that is so fascinating. And I really, in conversations with Dr. Thaxton, started to really get into this. And sometime during that year, I was fortunate enough to receive a Rotary scholarship from the Dallas Rotary Club. And later, right near the end of that year, I received notice that I'd been accepted to Cambridge, and which was this place where I really wanted to go. And that's how I got there. But I think I got intrigued with the idea of a British education from reading certain authors that I really liked. C.S. Lewis, Chesterton, Dorothy Sayers, and a columnist whose column I read at the time a lot, George Will, who had studied over there and extolled the virtues of the British tutorial system.
That's great.
So what was one of the most interesting things that you encountered there?
Well, the most exciting thing was when I first got to Cambridge, I was assigned a supervisor who happened to have written her PhD on the history of the controversy over the origin of life, the very thing I was interested in. And so I had a really great person to work with. Her name was Harmke Kaminga, a Dutch scholar. And we didn't know that there would be such a person there. It was the Department of the History and Philosophy of Science. And I ended up doing a PhD thesis on the question of origin of life. And so it was on origin of life biology within this interdisciplinary program. So that was a great fit. But we made lots of friends from all over the world. It was a wonderful place. So I had a great experience in Cambridge. The British way of doing scholarship and of developing arguments. It's a very rhetorical and literary culture. And it really, I found, suited me. And I learned a lot from being around really thoughtful British people.
So what'd you do for fun at Cambridge?
Well, I did enjoy some sports. I played basketball for a year for the Cambridge team, which was very fun. I was 30 at the time. All the other guys, except one Israeli, were right out of undergrad. And that was fun. And I did also a little boxing, which I know you wanted to talk about. So I learned to box in the dormitory when I was an undergrad from a friend who had learned from his dad. And when I was in Dallas, we had a Russian immigrant come to Dallas who was the 1958 Russian national champion as middleweight. And he started teaching boxing in South Dallas. And I heard about it from a colleague at the oil company where I worked. So we had actually this coach, his name was Joseph Budman, and he had 2 geophysicists in his club, and we were learning. But he taught beautiful technique, and I was always attracted in sports. I had limited athletic ability, and so whether it was baseball or basketball or now boxing, I always loved to learn from people who could teach technique that would help you go further than your natural athletic ability would normally allow.
That was a question of mine. Did you really ever think that you would do boxing? Was that something that, oh yeah, I think I should do this?
Well, there's kind of a funny story with Cambridge, because I first learned about Joseph Budman, the Dallas coach, from a colleague at ARCO who was leaving the office with a bag of boxing gear. Because I'd done it in college, I said, hey, whoa, what's that about? And he told me about this guy. And I'd been working out at another club in South Dallas at the time, wasn't getting much attention from any of the coaches, so I switched and started going with him. Then when Elaine came to Dallas, my wife, we were about to get engaged, and we decided maybe this wasn't the most advantageous thing to be doing if I had aspirations for PhD work and all that. So I stopped. And but then 3 years later, I'm in Cambridge, and I'm sitting in a course on the philosophy of mind with this very prominent British philosopher, really heady subject. And I noticed the guy across the aisle in the classroom has got a bag of boxing gear. So I asked him, "What's with the boxing gear?" He said, "Do you practice the noble art?" And I said, or the sweet science, I think he said. And I said, "Well, I've done a little." And he said, "Well, allow me to introduce myself." And he gave me his name and told me he was the captain of the Cambridge squad and invited me to come. And so that night, I went and worked out, and he didn't waste any time. He just immediately got me into the ring, and he was a light heavyweight and 6'3" and taller than I was. But the one thing that my Russian coach really taught was the defense. So I survived the onslaught. He said, "Okay, what about working out with us with an eye towards becoming our middleweight?" And so I got to the point where they offered me the spot, and I talked to my wife about it, Elaine, and one of the greatest things she ever did was ask a question. She said, "Well, but I thought we were coming over here to develop the brain cells." She said, "Does this really make sense?" And I was 30, and the thing was, we didn't really know how stiff the competition would be, and so I decided just to train. And what I did is I ended up teaching. I pulled back, and there was a younger British guy who took the spot, and I taught him a lot of the stuff that my Russian coach taught me. So that was, I never had a formal fight. Did an awful lot of sparring, and I got some very good instruction. But it was a good experience, and
For sure.
gave me a little confidence. Some of it carries over into debate. You learn to take a punch.
That's very true.